Hello and welcome to the Omnex webinar, Aligning Your Information Security Management System Framework with TISAX Controls. Today's webinar is being presented by Martin Hetwer, Managing Director of Omnex Europe, and Kumar Sivan. Kumar is an Omnex consultant, and I will let them outline their background relating to TISAX and information security. And I will further say that during this webinar, if you have any questions for them, please just enter them in the Q&A box and they will either get to them as it's going or at the end of the webinar, however they choose. But anything we can't get to during the webinar, we will respond to you in time. The webinar is being recorded and someone from Omnex will reach out to the participants with how to access the recording after the webinar. All right, Marty, you can take it away.
Thank you, Miles. I'm just going to pull up my presentation here. So one second. So good day, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. I'm going to let my partner Kumar introduce himself right now, and then I'll give you a few words about myself. Kumar, please.
Yeah. Good morning. Good day, everybody. Kumar Sivan is my name. I've been a consultant with Omnex for about 6 years now, specializing in general manufacturing and automotive related standards. I'm a mechanical engineer by training and spent close to 30 years with the automotive industry. And mostly I've been doing assignments that involve implementation support for various standards with customers. I do internal audits for customers. There are several companies that outsource their internal audits to people like us. And I also do training. I do training in various standards. Just to name a few, IATF standard, the automotive standard, ISO 9001, 14001, 45001, and specific to this webinar, 27001 and TISAX, which deal with the ISMS or Information Security Management System. This has been increasing in its focus and importance in the past year, given the increased amount of hacking that's going around the world and confidential information being compromised, intellectual property being compromised, and so on. So in the last year, the number of engagements that I have been doing in the information security space has increased quite a bit. So I am based in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I travel around the US and Canada as need be to client sites for engagements that I do. So that's about me. Over to you, Marty.
Thank you, Kumar. Kumar and I will be asking each other some questions as we go through the training. Again, my name is Martin Hetwer. I'm the Managing Director for Omnex Europe. I'm also the Director of Integrated Management Systems. Part of what I do is, and part of what Kumar and I both do, is we help clients implement different management systems and integrate those management systems, including ISO 27001 and the controls for TISAX. So that's we've been heavily vested in that. And unfortunately, many of our clients are coming late to this party, and so they're looking to us to give them help as quickly as possible to get them certified and get their systems in place. So today we'll talk a little bit about how that works together. So we got a three-part presentation here. We're going to talk about the information security assessment, that is the TISAX document. And we're going to talk a little bit about the 27001 information security management systems requirements. Then we're going to talk about how TISAX and Annex A controls align together. And if you're not aware, Annex A is the back half of ISO 27001. And then we're going to take a look at some of the information security management management system clauses and requirements. So what is TISAX? Well, it's really a tool there to help us analyze and understand and control the risks of threats and vulnerabilities against our assets. And that's really where one of the first things that organizations need to do is understand what assets they need to protect. So why do we need TISAX certification? And Kumar was gracious enough to allude to that. Of course, we want to protect our organizational assets and the information that we needed to do business. So it's very important for the team to understand and really consider what types of information or what records or what types of assets in terms of physical assets or data or intellectual property, trade secrets, organizational knowledge. What is this kind of stuff that needs to be protected so that it doesn't go missing and that we can continue doing business? And that goes into the realm of actual physical technology. So if something were to happen with our ability to transmit scheduling and shipping data and stuff like, that kind of data, we'd be, in many cases dead in the water because we wouldn't be able to ship products. The other thing is, one of the key drivers of TISAX is to protect the customer and our combined intellectual property. Whether the customer is design responsible or we're design responsible or we share some type of responsibility for the design, obviously we don't want that intellectual property to be compromised in any way or lost or potentially taken and sold somewhere else. So that's another big reason. Another thing we don't often consider.
Marty?
Go ahead, Kumar.
Sorry to interrupt. I see a combination. There's one or two Omnex people, but then there's some participants that have signed on. Maybe we should go around and have the participants say one or two sentences about themselves, what background they're from and why they're here, kind of thing. So we get.
I'm not sure they have access to a microphone in this webinar. I think it's directly.
Okay. All right. Okay.
We would have stopped for introductions.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
No problem,
Right.
sir.
Sorry about that.
Very good. Yeah, no problem. So yeah, I'm sorry. We also have a lot of stuff to cover in a very short period of time. So I'm going to do my best to stay on track. The other thing that organizations need to understand is the obligations, those legal, regulatory, statutory, and contractual obligations that the company has signed up to make sure that they get done. We'll talk a little bit about compliance in a moment. The other thing that we want to make sure that we don't do is we don't leave any vulnerabilities in our systems that might allow some type of a breach or a threat to damage critical equipment. And of course, there's been many cases that we've seen out there where somebody's been able to get into the infrastructure system of different sites and would be able to cause significant damage to their critical pieces of equipment or key assets that they need to run their business every day. And there's other things too. It's not just from the broader organizational side of things, but also on a more personal level. I'm sure many of us have lost a phone somewhere, or perhaps lost a laptop satchel at the airport or somewhere else, or left it in the company car and came out to find the back window broken and the satchel gone. Right. And those things happen. They happen, and so we need to have some type of a plan to try and reduce the impact or reduce the occurrence of those things happening. Or did we forget a very important prototype part in the boot of the rental car? Right. So there was a story a couple of years ago where the two engineers left a test site, and both of them were absolutely sure that they had taken the prototype out of the trunk. Neither of them did, and when they dropped off the rental car, the rental agency informed the police of a suspicious package, which they immediately destroyed at the airport. So, big loss of prototype engineering and data. They were one-off parts. Not too long ago, the Nuclear Weapons Agency actually got hit by a cyber attack. I mean, those are the people that control the stockpiles for the nuclear weapons for the United States. And if those good people can get hacked, you know, what kind of, you know, what's the potential for individual organizations or even individuals or small businesses to get hacked? Of course, it's you know, anybody is generally at risk here, or there's a threat thereof. The other thing I just wanted to point out here is that many companies work in silos. Well, we don't like to work in silos. Sometimes we do. We do tend to have functional silos, right? And part of as Kumar pointed out earlier, the IATF standard requires that process owners be assigned for all the key processes within the organization. And the same goes for the information security management system. Roles, responsibilities, and ownership, not only of processes, but of risks need to be there. And so really what we understand is who holds the launch key codes within each of those silos. How are we preventing bad things from happening? How are we preventing unintended outcomes from happening? And of course, people that have been assigned those roles and responsibilities and authorities by top management, they are our process owners. They are our first line of defense when it comes to managing their processes and their controls. We mentioned earlier that we want to talk about information security management system. The requirements for that are in the ISO IEC 27001 2013, folks. 2013 is when this standard came out. Now, they did review it in 2019, and they were satisfied that it didn't need any significant changes at that time. But many of the management system standards get reviewed every 5 years. And so, interestingly enough, this standard says information technology security techniques, information security management system requirements. So whether information security takes a higher level of prevalence within the organization, or it's a subset of information technology. Again, we have to figure out how these functions work together, how IT and information security or IS work together. The other part of the standard, or both standards, they're very heavily based on risk management. And there's another management standard out there for risk, and that's ISO 31000. So if you're interested in risk management, maybe pick up a copy of that and look through it, or take a course with Omnex. We'll guide you through risk management as well too. Although there is no formal requirement to do risk management, there is a requirement to assess and treat risks from the standard. So the one thing that we wanted to talk about is our information security assessment. And there's a workbook out there. It's free of charge. We can get it from the VDA, and we can download it from the TISAX site. And what it is a self-assessment. It's an Excel workbook, and it is a self-assessment. It allows organizations to look, and basically ask a bunch of questions, or the form asks a bunch of questions, and the organization is supposed to respond with where it believes its level of maturity is. Okay. We can help with that, but the organization can certainly do that themselves, right? You can get a free copy of this workbook, and you can do the assessment. And when you find out you got more gaps than you thought you had, maybe you call us up, Kumar or Omnex, and we'll come in and help with the rest of it. Of course, we can use it for performing audits on our own departments or on our own systems. So kind of a little bit of history here really quickly. 2017, the VDA, or the German Association of Automotive Industry, defined a uniform method for conducting assessments against the Trusted Information Security Assessment Exchange. So there's a set of criteria. And what they came up with was a catalog of requirements. And those catalogs, again, or this catalog that we're speaking about, is nothing more than a series of control questions. It's these control questions that we ask of the organization to determine where we are in terms of a level of maturity. So for those of you that are familiar with ASPICE for software development, you know that there's a maturity level there as well. And so TISAX and ASPICE use almost an identical system for establishing maturity for different things. And we'll have a look at that in just a moment here.
So
Now,
here's a point for discussion, Marty. Let's say I have an existing information security management system in place. I have already been certified to 27001. Why would I need to go for TISAX, especially given that TISAX came 4 years after the 27001 standard? So.
Yeah, good question. So again, one of the reasons, or one of the drivers, is that the TISAX certification and assessment level is something that some of the OEMs have been asking for. You know, Volkswagen for sure, BMW, they've been asking their suppliers to get a TISAX label for their information security management system. So basically to certify. Now the question is, you may have an information security management system that may or may not be certified to 27001, but this workbook talks about specific controls, and we'll have a look at some of those specific controls. It might be that your current information security management system is shy of some of those controls. Okay. It may be shy, and so those will have to be implemented before you'd be able to get your label certification. And conversely, and I'm going to say this a couple of times in this webinar, you are not likely to be given or assessed a label for TISAX without first having the framework. For an information security management system. We can go chicken or egg, but the fact is you need a basis on which to build your controls, whether those are Annex A controls or the subset TISAX controls, doesn't matter. You still need to have the framework for an information security management on which to build those controls. As Kumar pointed out, there in this workbook, there's a couple of tabs which I'll show you here on the next slide, but it says the tab information security includes all the basic controls based on 27001. Isn't that interesting? TISAX controls are based on ISO 27001, Annex A to be specific. And so, as Kumar said, 4 years later, 4 years after Annex A came out, the VDA published this set of controls that are based on Annex A controls. It's a subset, it's a smaller set of controls, but it's essentially the same controls, and we'll look at that. And
so even if my customer wants me to just get a TISAX label, I would still have to build it upon a information security management system as a foundation.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, there are some controls in there which we'll talk about specifically that point directly back to Annex A. And so, you know, from a comparison point of view, and to tell you or to show you that I'm not fibbing to you, you can see the cross reference here between Annex A and TISAX, and they're essentially the same set of controls. However, Annex A has quite a few more. Annex A has quite a few more specific controls. Okay, and that's why TISAX is a subset. They're basically the same controls, but a smaller group or smaller subset. And within the workbook, there's 3 significant tabs. There's, of course, the main tab, which is information security, which has all of these different domains, from information security policies to asset management, risk management, human resources, physical security, cryptography, operational security, supplier relationship, compliance. All of those things are made up with a set of specific controls for the organization. Beyond that, depending on whether or not you're responsible for creating or handling prototypes, this may also be something that forms part of what you need to submit for assessment for your TISAX label. So you've got prototype protection in here as well. Again, if you're not responsible for prototypes, then maybe that does not apply to your organization. And there are some special types of data that need to be protected, which we'll talk about shortly. Okay, so here we have all the chapters, and we can see here it's a spider chart or radar chart, and it starts at level 0, which means that the organization has nothing done, and it goes all the way out to level 5. The target level, next slide, target level is level 3. Okay, at least that's where we should start. Now, Kumar did make a good point. Many people are implementing TISAX and information security because their customer expects it. That, in my mind, is a bit short-sighted. We should be implementing information security management system and controls because it's the right thing to do, not because the customer demands it or is looking for a label. That's a bit short-sighted. And so, the first thing is when we look at the maturity level, or we look what label we're having, there's what the customer wants, and then there's what the organization wants and needs, not only for today, but also for the future. We know that this only become a bigger issue going forth in the future. And so because of that, we may decide that we want a higher level of maturity or a higher level of assessment based on the strategic direction of the organization. So the workbook, and we'll look at a couple examples in the workbook here. And so there's a couple of things there: protection with a high class of protection needs, and then we have a very high class of protection, but it's a very limited scope for those things that are very high protection need. If we're talking about prototypes and other things that that contain serious intellectual property or trade secrets or something like that, that requires high level of production, including some information, for instance, drawings or engineering specifications. Those types of things would also be a high level of protection that's required. The other thing that we should also consider, as I said, is compliance obligations. So is the company actually in compliance with the country of origin, the country of destination throughout the life cycle of the product, right? We have to consider those legal, regulatory, statutory, and contractual requirements. The other part of this workbook talks about the first part, or when we open the workbook, the first thing we're going to see is a control question. Simply a question about what needs to be controlled, and they give us the objectives. So only if information security is part of the strategic goals of an organization, information security can be implemented in a sustainable manner. So it gives us the objective. This is what the writers of the standard, or in this case, the requirements and the controls, intended. So we should know that. We should understand what the objective is. And then it gives us a couple of columns about must and should requirements. If you know about other management systems, anywhere you see a shall, that means we have to do something. In this case, the information security assessment uses the word must. Must equates to the shalls. And then the next column, which is not shown here, is the should column. And those are other things that we need to consider and may want to consider to help bolster our information security management system and its controls. And so everywhere we see a plus, that is a requirement. So that's essentially what we have for the high level requirements. Now let's take a look at individuals. So let's take a little peek into the workbook. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through all of these. Workbook is pretty self-explanatory, as well as Annex A. Annex A is very self-explanatory. You just need to go and have a look. And if you have any questions, contact someone, and including Kumar and I would be more than happy to answer your questions about these things. So as I said, the first thing that starts off here, and I'm just going to see if I can just change my pointer. Hopefully we can see a little bit better. We can see that it starts with the actual line items, the numbered line items from the standard. And then it talks about the policies, information security policies. It talks about the header line item and what that is. And so the first question is, to what extent are information security policies available? It says the organization needs at least one information security policy. Kumar and I have been working with a specific tool, and it recommends up to 24 different policies. It recommends up to 24 different policies for your TISAX controls and your information security management system. So whether it's 1 or 18 or 24, it's really up to the organization to decide what it wants to implement for a policy. By the way, for argument, policy is what the organization wants to do. So what does leadership want to do? Those are the policies. Procedures are the how. Procedures are the how. The policy is the what. What does the organization want to do? And as I said a moment ago, there's must and should requirements. And now let's focus on the must. So for these policies, it says the requirements for information security have been determined and documented. By who? Well, by top management, by senior management. The requirements are adapted to goals of the organization. Yes, absolutely true. The policy is tied to the strategic direction and the goals of the organization. They are linked together. So very good. A policy has been created and approved by the organization's management. So again, one or more policies being approved by top management, right? That's what they're saying that the organization needs to do. Right? The what. And then the policy includes objectives. And those objectives need to be tied to the information security management system. We also have the should requirements. We can consider these, right? For our TISAX assessment, we need to do at least the must, but we should seriously consider these other ones because it's only going to help us. It's only going to help us strengthen our information security systems and controls. Now, we talked about the linkage between the TISAX control and Annex A. And lo and behold, right in the TISAX workbook, they give you the actual reference clauses out of Annex A. They give them to you. And so making that linkage, making that linkage back to your information security framework is easy. They tell you right here in the workbook, this is what we need to do. And so in this case, A5 is about management direction of information security. The objective of this annex is to manage direction and support for the information security in line with the organization's information security management system requirements. So that's what Annex A says about A5, A5.1. So you need to look here. You need to look here what the TISAX control is. And then you need to take these numbers and you need to go over to Annex A and you need to look in clear, plain English what the requirement or the intent is from Annex A for the control. Some of these Annex A say they're a control, others say a policy is required. You need to look and separate them. In this particular case, we've got incident management. To what extent are information security events processed? Organized processing of information security events aims at limiting the potential damage and preventing reoccurrence. Potentials, risk. What does this speak to? Well, this speaks to nothing else but continual improvement and corrective action and problem solving. If you've already got a quality management system, you've already got policies and procedures for corrective action, continual improvement, and problem solving. Integrating those current procedures and processes with your information security management system is a breeze. It's what management's supposed to do, is to integrate those things together. And so A16 says about management information security, incidences, and weakness. The objective is to ensure consistent and effective effective process approach to the life cycle of incidents, events, and weaknesses. And A18 is about compliance. As I said, this is one where we tend to be a little bit weak, or where many companies tend to be a little bit weak. And so it's the compliance with legal and contractual requirements. The difference between conforming with a standard is we can choose to conform to a standard, but if we ignore best practices, often we do that to our own detriment. If we ignore compliance issues, legal, regulatory, statutory, somebody's going to pay a fine or go to jail. That's the difference between conformance and compliance. When you hear compliance, be very afraid. Somebody could potentially go to jail. So how, what are we doing? What's the organization doing in meeting its compliance obligations for its information security management system, specifically reporting of breaches and stuff like that, right? Depending what that breach is. Asset management. To what extent is information assets classified and managed in terms of their protection needs? The company needs to have a process, a policy and procedures on how we classify and handle that type of information. So what's required? A consistent scheme for classification of information assets with regards to its protection objective. Evaluation of identified assets carried out according to defined criteria. Well, what does that say here? A81 is about the responsibility of assets. Who owns those assets? Within the organization, within those silos, which process owners or assets owners are there? And how are they protecting them? If they're responsible for those assets, how are they protecting them? The next thing is information classification. How do we prevent people sharing information that they shouldn't be sharing, right? We need to identify in terms of some level of classification, whether that's secret, highly confidential, strictly confidential, public information, whatever the organization decides needs to be there for classification levels. And the last one here that I think we're going to cover today is access control. So A91 is about requirements for access and how we limit access to information and facilities. The other is about access management to ensure that only authorized people can access systems. The other 893 is about user responsibilities to make users accountable for safeguarding their data and their authentication information, so on and so forth.
Hey, Marty.
So, yep, go ahead, Kumar.
So I think maybe to talk about the term role-based access control may be appropriate because that's a common buzzword that's used with access control. Maybe you want to expand on that a little bit.
So, each individual person has their responsibilities and authorities for managing their assets, or at least access to those assets, right? And so defining, as part of classification, defining those roles is something that needs to happen, right? Obviously, we can't give people access to everything, right? People need to know what they need to know and don't need to know what they don't need to know. Simple as that, right? So giving people access to the right assets, to the right information, to the right records, so that they can do their job is really what's important. And how we do that, right? By what means do we give people access? And how do they get in?
So basically, you create layers within the company. At the CXO level, they have possibly the keys to the kingdom. And then as you come down in layers within the company, you have restrictions on access based on what they need to do to carry out their responsibilities in their job. So.
No, absolutely correct. But I hesitate at the moment to say that the control for those things should be at the top. We know that there are leaders out there that have given away the keys to the kingdom, right? Because they just didn't know.
No, I mean, I was meaning like for example, somebody that's high up in HR has access to all the personal information. The CFO would have access to financial information. So like that, you have specific silos that need to have much deeper level access. So that's what I was referring to. Not necessarily access to everything.
Understood, Kumar. Okay, must and should requirements, the needs and objectives there. So three of those protection needs and objectives. One is for confidentiality, the other is integrity, and the third is availability. Kumar, maybe you want to talk a little bit about availability?
Yeah, so availability is when somebody is accessing information, is it available to them and in a reasonable amount of time? Like if you access a document, does it pull up within, say, 5 seconds or something? So availability has to do with how soon you're able to access, what you're able to access based on what you're, we talked about role-based access control. So on a need to know basis, you need to have access available to the right information within a reasonable amount of time.
Very good. Protection targets. Information with a high need of protection. Well, these are the prototypes that we were talking about earlier, and we'll have another look at that in just a moment here. But those with very high protection level is called special data. And that's the type of data that's personal information and it's protected by the law. In this case, here in Germany, by GDPR requirements, right? California has requirements, Maryland has requirements, Singapore has requirements, right? So that data, that personally protected information has a very high security need, right? Especially if we were sending in, people's information across different systems, right? That may be related to an individual. Maybe their their financial information about a vehicle that they're purchasing or something like that. So the higher the protection need, the more things we need to do. The higher the protection need, we need to do that. And so the difference between an AL2 assessment level and AL3 is that AL2 uncovers anything with a high protection need. Anything with a very high protection need would be an AL3, an assessment level 3. And of course, if we're talking about these prototype parts and handling of test vehicles, the assessment level automatically increases to being high, to being an AL3 level. And so what are those? Well, again, it's our prototype parts, our prototype vehicles, our test and roadworthy vehicles, and any events or photo shoots that we're doing. And I always like to say, our controls only go so far. If I want to know what my competitors are working on, I just go down to the local tool shop or the local gauge shop, and I see my competitors' parts laying out on the tables, on the workbenches. Their drawings are hanging up on the boards, right, while they're working on those gauges or those tools, right? So after that information leaves our hands, after that information leaves our controls, what's happening with it, right? We kind of expect those people that help us with our prototypes to maintain that information. But no, I wouldn't be so sure. And again, any data with a special character or with a special character, any data with special categories of data that are protected by the law, for instance, Article 28 or Article 9 of GDPR would be an AL3. So it really comes down to understanding what is the assessment objective from your customer. Based on what you're doing, what you're supplying with them, your customer will give you some type, or a relevant interested party will give you some direction in terms of what assessment level you want. We don't have to wait for the customer. We can ourselves as an organization decide what that level is, provided it's at least as strong as our customer, if not higher than what our customer is demanding. So what are those? Again, those are legally protected information, or regularly or protected by regulation or by contract. That's information on the very high protection needs.
So
As
Marty,
I mentioned, go ahead.
you talked earlier about maturity levels, and now we are talking about assessment levels. Maybe if you can just point out the difference between a maturity level and assessment level, that may be useful.
The assessment level is what we're trying to shoot for in terms of our TISAX assessment, right? That level is usually a discussion with the customer or some other relevant interested party that wants us to get a TISAX assessment label, right? So that's something that's normally discussed. But as I said, it could also be that the organization with some foresight said, we want to go for this assessment level 3, and maybe the customer is only asking for an assessment level 2. Maturity levels are completely different. Maturity levels are based on how much meat is on the bone around each process. So if I have a process that's not well defined, or people don't know about that process or do it inconsistently, that maturity level of that process might be quite low. It might only be a level 1, or maybe a level 2. But for level 3, we need a defined process, and it has to be working. It has to be being improved. And we'll get to that point. I'll let Kumar say the 4 words that explain a key process. What has to happen from a process owner standpoint? Implement.
PDCA you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about establish, implement, maintain, and improve. Right. That's
Right,
the part of
right.
every management system. Sorry. Go ahead.
So it appears that maturity is something, the more work you put into the information security management system, the more mature it becomes, and there are certain steps that are defined for maturity level. Assessment levels, it appears like it's based on what the customer wants and the type of information that you are looking to protect.
Very good. Very good. As I said, one of the very first things we have to do, regardless if it's our information security level or trying to define our TISAX controls, is to determine what controls are needed to protect our assets. What controls are needed to protect our assets? Well, the first step is defining what those assets are. We talked about intellectual property. Kumar mentioned financials, right? The chief financial officer might be there. We might have specific code or architecture. Maybe we have customer-owned tools, right, that we have to protect and maintain. Personal information, we talked about, obviously product designs might be in there with intellectual property. Process secrets or proprietary trade secrets, those are things that we want to protect. And of course, our organizational knowledge. If we've been around for a while, we've probably been gathering a lot of knowledge, and we don't want to lose that, right? When people leave or retired, we want to make sure that we keep hold of that organizational knowledge because it's important. Once we've assessed what the assets are, then we should also start to assess the potential damage if those assets were to be compromised. Would it be severe or very high, maybe even long term? Or is it significant, medium term to the organization? Or is it just something that's minor, short term? How bad is it? How bad is it if this asset were to be compromised? And the next thing we need to consider, yes, we have a control, but is that control going to be effective? Is that control that we've put in place, or we're planning to put in place, is it going to be effective to protect that asset? If not, that is also a significant risk. So it's not just about determining what assets we have and what controls, it's about also analyzing the situation to determine whether or not the control that we have in place is actually going to work and do what we expect it to do. And it doesn't matter. There's nothing in the standard that says, how many levels we need to have, whether that's 3 levels or 5 levels or 10 levels, right? It's really up to the organization to decide how to do that. And that's the next point. What is the risk if the controls fail to protect the asset, right? So one of the controls that we hear all the time is, oh, we have an NDA. Great. You've got an NDA. What good is it? You know what? The NDA only protects you from people knowingly sharing information that they shouldn't. But what about all the times where they unknowingly, unwittingly share information, or that they didn't know that they weren't supposed to share that, or with whom they were supposed to share that, or they send a mass email out and copy everybody and their brother with the information that shouldn't be out there, right? Or we get hacked. Right? Or the laptop gets left in the back of the car and the window's broken and the laptop's gone, right? At that point, the NDA does us no good whatsoever. So an NDA is not a control. I mean, it might be a control for not knowingly sharing information, but at the end of the day, it only goes so far as a control. So don't put your faith in NDAs. Don't put your faith in NDAs. By the way, what brought down the Death Star? Our Star Wars fans, you know what brought down the Death Star? Think back. The rebels stole the plans. The rebels stole the plans to the Death Star, and they found the inherent weakness. They found the weakness in the system and they exploited it, and they brought down the Death Star. This is the first case of hacking, right? The rebels hacked the system. They stole the plans to the Death Star, and that brought it down because there was a vulnerability and an inherent threat in the design. So how good are our controls? Well, the damn Death Star controls weren't all that great.
So a quick point, not necessarily a question. In several organizations, the risk is a malicious insider, and that is something that is often quite difficult to control. As somebody that is a disgruntled employee, or somebody that's unhappy, somebody that's getting ready to quit the company, those are the kinds of people that represent a insider that has access to intellectual property and can possibly compromise that information.
Yep, absolutely correct, right? And so our protection targets are for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But some of that information is meant to be shared, right? Organizational knowledge is meant to be shared, right? Some of it has to be secured. And some of those assets need to be protected. And of course, there's standards out there that help us do that. To Kumar's point, assets are subject to both deliberate and accidental threats. With related systems, networks, and people, we have inherent vulnerabilities. And so how we manage those risks is up to the organizations. We all collect, possess, store, transmit information, stuff that's electronic, physical, and verbal. How do we protect that stuff against hazards? Well, we do that through controls. We do that through controls. And some control, well, first off, a control is a measure that modifies risk. That's your next takeaway. And control is a measure that modifies risk. And there are basically a couple of different categories. There's organizational controls, usually that implemented through policy, procedures, and processes, that have an effect on people and the performance. And then we also have technical controls. They're usually something like hardware or software related. They might even be automated within the system. And some of these controls are both. And so we have some different type of controls. I'm not going to spend time going through them, but we have some controls that are prevention based. Prevention, of course, can reduce or eliminate the occurrence of a particular risk. We might have deterrence in there. We might have something that detects. We might have some ongoing monitoring that detects an incident or a disturbance in the force or whatever that might be. We have some controls that help us with recovery, our backup procedures, right? For instance, or our, other types of recovery procedures. We talked about nonconformity and corrective action. And then awareness as well too. The more we build awareness in people, the more likely they are to make better decisions. We'll talk about that in just a minute. So let's talk at some of these requirements. Kumar, you want to walk through the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle here?
Yeah, the Plan, Do, Check Act, you see the 4 through 10, these are the clauses from the ISO standard, and clause 4 through clause 10. If you see the gray box at the bottom right, it refers to a high-level structure. So ISO has laid out much of the standards in the same high-level structure. So clause 4 in a variety of standards will always be context of the organization. Clause 8 is operations, your main bread and butter, what your organization does. Clause 10 is all about improvement. So this is laying out the Plan, Do, Check, Act format of the 27001 standard. And what's highlighted in yellow is something that's more unique to the information security management system. And the highlighted ones specifically talk about how you, a very rigorous way in which you identify risks, you analyze risks, and then you quantify the risk, and then finally, how are you going to treat the risk to try and mitigate the risk, which Marty is going to talk about more in detail. But the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle is something that was developed in the 70s by a gentleman named Dr. Deming, and it is a continuous cycle that you never stop. You keep doing, you plan, you execute, then you check to see how you did, and then based on the analysis of how you did, you may assign objectives or KPIs to processes, and you measure them, and then if they fall short, then you have to act to try and change something, and then you go back to the plan, and it's a continuous cycle.
So one of the things leadership is obligated to do is to integrate the requirements into the business management system. And so you can see here, this is 27001, but management review, internal audit, continual improvement, nonconformity, corrective action, planning for resources, competence, documented information, actions to address risks and opportunities, leadership commitment, policy, understanding the organization's context, interests. These are all parts of other management systems. We'll find that in the quality management system. We find that in the environmental management system. We find it in the health and safety management system and energy management and in 27001. And as a result of that, we can integrate all of our processes using the same procedures, right? We can update our procedures regardless of what management system we're talking about. So there's a great benefit to that. Understanding the organization in its context is a process, right? It helps us to understand what is relevant to our strategic direction of the organization. And if done correctly, it should help us to achieve the intended results of our management system. We need to consider external context and internal context. For those of you that are here today and listening in, at what point did your leadership team figure out that TISAX was important to your business, right? Now we've got the letter from the customer saying we can't bid on new business unless we get a TISAX label. When did the first letter come out? How many years ago did the first letter come out and that got ignored? And now that we've got the nasty letter from the customer saying you can't bid on new business until you get this, management is sitting up in their chairs and going, "Ooh, we're late to the party here, folks." Why? Because they didn't understand context. They didn't understand the issues that were coming down the pipeline that was going to impact their business. Their process for understanding external issues was not good. It was not effective. Can also be internal context. Those are things that are related to value, culture, knowledge, and performance. Next one is understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. Those people that are relevant to our management system, whether they're related to quality or health and safety or environmental. There's going to be a bunch of interested parties. Some of those interested parties are much more important because they impact the sustainability of the management system and the organization. And so we have to filter through. We need to filter through all those interested parties and determine which of those interested parties are significant. And they're going to bring their own expectations and requirements. And we need to filter those again to determine what we need to do inside our management system. So that those interested parties, those relevant interested parties that have an impact on our business are completely satisfied. Forgotten interested parties. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, but the situation a couple of years ago where the organization forgot to talk to the local fire department. They built a new factory, forgot to talk to the local fire department about what they should do. Fire started very late, I think what they say.
1:30 in the morning.
Yeah, 1:30 in the morning. Fire department showed up, ran into the magnesium plant with their fire hoses and burned the plant to the ground. Maybe that should have been a bunch of people they should have talked to. But what to do if you're coming to fight a fire at a magnesium plant? Maybe bringing water into the plant is not the best idea. They had other plants, by the way. This company had other plants, and they had talked with the local fire department. The fire department knew exactly what they had to do if they were called to come fight a magnesium fire. That was the difference. In this plant, they weren't. They just showed up. Scope of the management system, right? We have to define it just like we define the scope of a project. The things that we're going to do at that site at that time goes into the scope. The stuff that we're going to do at that time for our management system goes in scope. Everything that we're not going to do or is owned by somebody else, like corporate or somebody else, that's outside of our scope, clearly defined. People have a short memory. That's why we need a scope statement, right? Because at some point they're going to come back and go, well, why didn't you do that? Why didn't you take responsibility for that? Well, it wasn't in scope. This is our get out of free jail card, right? This is the fence that protects the business. Inside the fence is what they own. In my house, I have German Shepherds. The backyard is fenced. Everything inside the fence they own, right? And they do a really good job of taking care of what's inside that fence. Leadership and commitment. I'm just going to direct you to be here. Ensuring the integration of the information security management system requirements into the organization's process. It's not a standalone system, folks. ISMS is not something that stands alone on the side. Intended to be integrated into the business, just like we integrate our quality requirements, our health and safety requirements, and our energy requirements, our laboratory requirements, and our environmental requirements into the management system, into the business. Supporting other people in their effectiveness, right? Making sure that people are competent and that they understand their roles and responsibilities and are given the authority to run those processes. All right, I think we're pretty much out of time, but we're also pretty much at the end of the presentation here. There's a few more slides that I wanted to maybe cover over with you. You'll get a copy of the information here so that you have it. Basically, what we did is we looked at where the TISAX controls aligned with the requirements of Annex A or 27001. Okay. Questions? Do we have time for questions? Kumar, can you see the question log?
I don't see any questions in the chat portion.
Maybe Miles can help us. Miles, anything come in?
No, there's no questions right now.
Well, it was a bit of a fire hose, folks. We really threw a lot of information at you very quickly here, but as long as you get the idea that you can't do one without the other, you're not going to be successful implementing TISAX controls without having integrated the processes and the clauses of an effective information management system. And as I said, Annex A is the full list of controls for the information security management system. TISAX is only a subset of those. They're the same controls, but it's a smaller subset. I believe it's 41 different controls out of all the other dozens of or 100 whatever controls for Annex A, right?
So Marty, in the minute or so we have left, you can talk perhaps about the statement of applicability portion to wrap it up.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we get to do once we start defining our assets and looking at the controls is, there may be things that we don't do. For instance, we may not develop any software. If we don't develop any of our own software, then understanding the security controls around software development or testing of that software or hosting data with that software, that doesn't apply to us. It doesn't apply to us because it's not anything we do. And if you did, you probably got the requirement to do some type of ASPICE certification anyways, right?
So there's one question from Ricardo. I'll just read it out. He's saying, given an organization that's already 27001 certified, what are the main challenges of seeking TISAX?
Well, the question is, are the controls that are required the must controls, and we could say by extension the should controls, are those controls already in place and functioning effectively in the current management system? Because it may have been that we got our management system in place, but we implemented missing some of those controls. And if some of those missing controls are also part of the must controls, then we need to go back. That's a gap. That's a gap, and we need to go back and we need to fill that gap. We need to fix it with an effective control. Again, the value is not fulfilling a customer requirement. The value is having proof to show all your other partners that you have an effective information security management system. That's the value, not to get a label, right? Not to get a label or to get a flag. No, the value is that you can prove not only to yourselves, but your partners and your customers that you have an effective information security management system with controls that's going to protect ourselves and also our customers and partners. That's the value.
So just to add to what Marty shared, there's a total of 114 controls in Annex A for 27001. And about 41 controls for TISAX. So TISAX is a subset of Annex A, if you will. And if you're already 27001 and you have a good working management system in place, it's going to be relatively easier for you to get a TISAX label. And as Marty mentioned, you want to go through the ISA, the Excel document that you can download for free from the VDA website. And you just have to go through the musts column and see how you're doing with each of those and see where you have gaps to close that.
And we can help you with that, right, Kumar? That's what we've been doing heavily in the last couple of years, is helping clients to close those gaps, right, and to put controls in place.
So Jose wants to know, what are the basic sequential steps that an organization needs to take to be TISAX certified?
Good question. There's a TISAX handbook that's available from the ENX worksite that walks you through those particular steps, right? The first step obviously is to do your homework and make sure your controls that you have your controls and that you have process owners in place, right? And then of course we want to rate those based on a maturity level. The longest lead time item at this point is to actually find an assessor That seems to be the longest lead time activity, is that if you want, or if you've been asked to get an assessment done by a certain period of time, you almost have to start now by filling out the application and getting the paperwork in so that you can get an assessor in time. So that's, I would say, primary step one is to put in your application and start that process working on that. Meantime, start looking again, look at your assets first, then figure out what your controls are, then figure out if those controls are at risk or if those assets are at risk, analyze those, and then come up with a risk treatment plan, right? And so where we find that we have unacceptable risks, we need to go and bolster our controls or add controls to fill those gaps.
Yeah, to add to what Marty just said, finding an assessor or a registrar company that's going to assess you is the all-important first step. And from a recent experience with a client, it set them back between 2 to 3 months in finding a company that was willing, within the time frame that they wanted, to come do an assessment. So get that first step out of the way as quickly as possible, because there's a lot of demand and there's not that many assessors out there. So get that decision out of the way. All right, I think that's all the questions I see, Marty. So thank you, everybody, for participating. Hopefully this was useful, and you know where to find us if you need help. And I'll let Marty say a few words to wrap this up as well.
So I just want to thank everybody for your time again. And I know it was a lot of information, but I hope we added some values. I really hope we gave you a couple of takeaways and a couple of aha moments that might stick with you in terms of your next steps with the organization, what you need to do if you're tasked with implementing these controls. So I hope that's helpful. One of the things about Omnex is we are a global organization, as many of you may know. And so wherever you're located, or your plants are located, or wherever your sites are located, we've probably got somebody close by to be able to support that, to support these activities. So please don't be afraid to reach out to us. Again, if you have any questions, any you'd like a more in-depth discussion, Kumar and I are here, as well as our other colleagues, our other information security colleagues are here. I see a couple of them here on the line today as well too. So very nice to have you. And so we'll go from there. Thank you.